Hi friends, hope you're having a great day. If you joined us, I'm videoing this one after we just finished our class party. That was so much fun playing those games with you guys. So today I'm going to read chapter 17. This one is called Uncle. When they pulled into the fairgrounds, they could hear music and see the Ferris wheel turning in the sky. They could smell the dust of the racetrack where the sprinkling cart had moistened it, and they could smell hamburgers frying and see balloons aloft. They could hear sheep blatting in their pens. An enormous voice over the loudspeaker said, "Attention, please. Will the owner of a Pontiac car, license number H2439, please move your car away from the fireworks shed?" "Can I have some money?" asked Fern. "Can I too?" asked Avery. "I'm going to go win a doll by spinning a wheel, and it'll stop at the right number," said Fern. "I'm going to steer a jet plane and make it bump into another one." "Can I have a balloon?" asked Fern. "Can I have a frozen custard and a cheeseburger and some raspberry soda pop?" asked Avery. "You children will be quiet until we get the pig unloaded," said Mrs. Arable. "Oh, let the children go off by themselves, suggested Mr. Arable. "The fair only comes once a year." Mr. Arable gave Fern 2 quarters and 2 dimes. We just studied money. How much money did she get? Now run along. Oh, and then he gave Avery 5 dimes and 4 nickels. Did Avery and Fern get the same amount? It's cool to figure that out. Remember, the money has to last you all day. Don't spend it in the first few minutes, and be back here at the truck by noontime so we can all have lunch together. And don't eat a lot of stuff that's going to make you sick to your stomach. "And if you go on those swings," said Mrs. Arable, "you hang on tight. You hang on very tight. You hear me?" "Don't get lost," said Mrs. Zuckerman. "Don't get dirty. Don't get overheated," said their mother. "Watch out for pickpockets," cautioned their father. "Don't cross the racetrack when the horses are coming," cried Mrs. Zuckerman. The children, that's a lot of stuff to remember. The children grabbed each other by the hand and danced off in the direction of the merry-go-round, towards the wonderful music and the wonderful adventure and the wonderful excitement, into the wonderful midway where there would be no parents to guard them and guide them, and where they could be happy and free to do as they pleased. Mrs. Arable stood quietly and watched them go. Then she sighed and she blew her nose. "Do you really think it's all right?" she asked. "Well, they've got to grow up sometime," said Mr. Arable. "And a fair's a good place to start, I guess." You think your mom and dad would have let you go off by yourself like that at a fair? I don't think my mom and dad would have let me go. While Wilbur was being unloaded and taken out of his crate and into his new pig pen, crowds gathered to watch. They stared at the sign, "Zuckerman's Famous Pig." Wilbur stared back and tried to look extra good. He was pleased with his new home. The pen was grassy, and it was shaded from the sun by a shed roof. Charlotte, watching her chance, scrambled out of the crate and climbed to a post on the other side of the roof. No one even noticed her. Templeton, not wishing to come out in broad daylight, stayed quietly under the straw at the bottom of the crate. Mr. Zuckerman poured some skim milk into Wilbur's trough. He pitched in some clean straw into the pen, and then he and Mrs. Zuckerman and the Arables walked away towards the cattle barn to get a look at the purebred cows and to see the sights. Mr. Zuckerman particularly wanted to go look at tractors. Mrs. Zuckerman wanted to go see a deep freezer. Lurvy wandered off by himself, hoping to meet some friends and have some fun on the midway. As soon as all the people were gone, Charlotte spoke to Wilbur. "It's a good thing you can't see what I see," she said. "What do you see?" asked Wilbur. "There's a pig in the next pen, and he's enormous. I'm afraid he's much bigger than you are." "Well, maybe he's older than I am, and he's had more time to grow," suggested Wilbur, and tears came to his eyes. "I'll drop down and have a closer look," Charlotte said. Then she crawled along the beam till she was directly over the next pen. She let herself down on a drag line till she hung in the air just in front of the big pig's snout. "May I have your name?" she asked politely. The pig stared at her. "No name," he said in a big hearty voice. "Just call me Uncle." Very well, Uncle, replied Charlotte. What's the date of your birth? Are you a spring pig? Sure, I'm a spring pig, replied Uncle. What'd you think I was, a spring chicken? Ha, ha, ha. That's a good one, hey, sister? Mildly funny, said Charlotte. I've heard funnier ones, though. I'm glad to have met you. Now I must be going. She ascended slowly and returned to Wilbur's pen. He claims he's a spring pig, reported Charlotte, and perhaps he is. One thing is for certain. He has a most unattractive personality. He's too familiar, too noisy, and he cracks very weak jokes. Also, he's not anywhere near as clean as you are, nor as pleasant. I took quite a dislike to him in our brief interview. He's going to be a hard pig to beat, though, Wilbur, on account of his size and weight. But with me helping you, it can be done. And there's a picture of Charlotte talking with Uncle. I think Wilbur's a much cuter pig, don't you? When are you going to spin a web? Asked Wilbur. This afternoon, late, if I'm not too tired, said Charlotte. The least little things tire me these days. I don't seem to have the energy I once did. My age, I guess. Wilbur looked at his friend. She looked rather swollen, and she seemed listless. I'm awfully sorry to hear that you're feeling poorly, Charlotte, he said. Perhaps if you spin a web and catch a couple of flies, you'll feel better. Perhaps, she said wearily. But I feel like the end of a long day. Clinging upside down to the ceiling, she settled down for a nap, leaving Wilbur very much worried. All morning, people wandered past Wilbur's pen. Dozens and dozens of strangers stopped to stare at him and admire his silky white coat, his curly tail, his kind and radiant expression. Then they would move on to the next pen where the bigger pig lay. Wilbur heard several people make favorable remarks about Uncle's great size. He couldn't help but overhear these remarks, and he couldn't help but worry. And now, with Charlotte not feeling well, he thought, oh dear. All morning, Templeton slept quietly under the straw. The day grew fiercely hot. At noon, the Zuckermans and the Arables returned to the pig pen. Then a few minutes later, Fern and Avery showed up. Fern had a monkey doll in her arms, and she was eating Cracker Jacks. Avery had a balloon tied to his ear, and he was chewing on a candied apple. The children were hot and dirty. Oh, isn't it hot, said Mrs. Zuckerman. It's terribly hot, said Mrs. Arable, fanning herself with an advertisement of a deep freeze. One by one, they all climbed into the truck and opened lunch boxes. The sun was beating down on everything. Nobody even seemed hungry. When are the judges going to decide about Wilbur? Asked Mrs. Zuckerman. Not till tomorrow, said Mr. Zuckerman. Lurvy appeared, carrying an Indian blanket that he had won. Oh, that's just what we need, said Avery, a blanket. Of course it is, replied Lurvy, and he spread the blanket across the sideboards of the truck so that it made like a little tent. The children sat in the shade under the blanket and felt much better. After lunch, they all stretched out and fell asleep. Oh, I like going to fairs. Have you ever been to a fair? They're so much fun to go to. I hope you get a chance to sometime if you've never been to one. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and we'll finish reading another chapter tomorrow.